Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Nick Halaris Show. Our guest this week is my good friend, another member from the SLS class of 2005, Pablo Arredondo. His current role is a VP of CoCounsel at Thomson Reuters, which was a company, part of an acquisition that Thomson Reuters had of a company that he co-founded and was the Chief Innovation Officer of, called Casetext. Pablo, welcome to the show.
Good to see you, Nick, and thanks for having me.
Dude, it's been too long, and I'm glad to finally get you on the podcast. We've started covering the topic of AI earlier this year, talking to someone who you've been on his podcast, our sort of mutual friend Nathan Labenz, and so it's a long time coming. I figure a good place to start is tell me about CoCounsel and what you're up to with that company.
Yeah, so I've been in legal tech in various forms now for about 14 years, and by far the most profound stuff that has been happening started with these language models, as they're called, and really from these neural net approaches to AI. And I think listeners of your podcast now are probably pretty versed in it because you've been doing a great job with a lot of good people speaking on it. But for us, where it started was actually back in 2018. There was a model called BERT, and we were trying to, as you know from law, you need a citator, right? Does one case overrule another case? That's like a big challenge. And in trying to kind of go after that challenge and try to do that in as automated a fashion as possible, right? You can't fully automate it, but we started exploring this very new approach where you create these language models. And for me, the first flickers were seeing that. We're seeing that the computer would know something was saying overruled, even if the wording was completely different. And, for legal research nerds like myself, like when you're really, that was actually kind of seismic, right? I mean, that was a big, big deal, even if at the time BERT, didn't get a lot of publicity. And so we started building search engines around that for case law, for depots, for all sorts of things. And OpenAI had then, a couple of years later released GPT-3, which we checked out. You remember GPT-3, very like, whoa, it's doing kind of cool things, but nowhere near professional grade. And a couple of years after that is when we got early access to GPT-4. So this is September 16th, 2022. 12:30 p.m. Not that it's like an important date in my life or anything, but yeah, no, that's when it happened. And what we saw there was just this quantum leap forward, right? It was just so much better than what we had seen before. And over the next week, like sleepless week, really sleepless months, but that first week, we were just proof of concept of so many different functionalities. Some were, depots, legal research, briefing, drafting, e-discovery, right? So many different things. And in fact, all of the legal tech field now that I see, we got to sort of experience in that week of like just seeing all the like early versions. Now, there's a lot of work that goes into making something really, really good and reliable versus kind of, just a proof of concept. But what CoCounsel was basically our saying, look, there are so many different things you can do with this technology. Let's pick our favorite 15 and build a suite of skills around that, skills as we call them. And then that got winnowed down to like 8, I think, that passed sort of our quality control. And this was in September 2022. So 6 months before GPT-4 became public. And about 6 weeks before even ChatGPT was out. So that's what CoCounsel, that's how it kind of got started. And what it is now with Thomson Reuters is going to be the sort of umbrella AI architecture across all of the product lines, across all of the different verticals. And that to me is very exciting because, content is king, they say. That's sort of a common saying. The truth is that content plays a big role even in the AI world because you need reliable content for the AI to look at and be pointed at and rely on and coming up with answers.
For sure. So is CoCounsel doing like the 8 things that pass the test? Is it like, was the original sort of use case that you envisioned for Casetext part of that, this site stuff, or did it go into the generative stuff like writing briefs?
Oh yeah, no. The site stuff, that was, from years ago, although it can certainly help with that. And I think there's going to be a whole new level of citator that you can get from that. Actually, there's a company called Paxton AI, I think, that's put their flag and sort of trying to, no pun intended, put their red flag, I'd say, in sort of applying it there. But yeah, this was everything from, depo prep, give me a list of questions and outlines for depo. Legal research was a key one. Increasingly, I'm seeing e-discovery and due diligence, situations where you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of documents. And we've been having a lot of success working with very elite attorneys, focused on that. There's nothing a lawyer does, basically, except for maybe whining and dining clients, that this technology is not going to have some role in, right? It's just all we do is read and write and analyze and review. And this is exactly what it does.
Yeah. Yeah, man, this might come across as a joke, but it's not really a joke. So one of the reasons actually that I decided not to go into law was I did this summer internship. I did several of them at different firms, and I was doing corporate law, which maybe that was the mistake to begin with. But
no comment.
Yeah, they would give me these assignments like, prepare a first draft of the next 10K, or prepare a draft merger agreement for these two types of companies. And back in the day, at that moment in time, all these law firms had these databases of all the crap they've ever worked on.
Yeah.
I would go and I would just find like a couple examples and just like copy them and change the names and turn it in. Yeah. And the lawyers would be like, "This is fantastic." And I'm like, I felt kind of bad about it, because it's like, dude, I literally just copied that. But it struck me, even back then, that there was something weird about that. But it seems like this particular technology is like perfect for those kinds of assignments, because it can do that maybe more intelligently than I did it.
Well, I mean, first of all, in terms of your client wants you to be doing that, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. Go do. I mean, you know what I mean? That I know it feels a little weird coming from like law school, where obviously like your original exam answers, all these things. But relying on precedent is a big part of what lawyers, when they're doing their job in a good way, do, because it's not reinventing the wheel. And I don't know about you, but the knowledge management systems I used at Kirkland & Ellis were horrible. I mean, just those DMS systems were so clunky. It was so hard to actually find the best precedent. And that's one aspect of it, right? You probably found earlier examples, but were they exactly the same kind of sale with the same kind of entities, all these things? Maybe, maybe not, right? It's hard to, I think that's one area where we're going to see the AI helping a lot, is surfacing really the best precedent. But no, that doesn't sound like a joke at all. I think it's much more common to hear that than to hear somebody like starting with a blank Word document and being like, this country, that's not how they do it.
Yeah, that's not how you do it. Well, when this stuff first came out, and I was thinking about all my friends who are, all our friends, mutual friends who are high-powered lawyers, the first thought that came to my mind, though, was like, is the price of legal services going to zero? And I don't really mean it's going to go to zero, but is it going to go down? I mean, it's been going up by double digits every year during the course of our career. But what is your take about sort of the economic consequences of it?
So when I would run around Sand Hill Road, begging for investments, not begging, pitching, I would point out that when I was an undergrad, I worked on the Human Genome Project. I was the lowest ranking member. I was cleaning up test tubes and stuff. Meg, you've heard this. You're laughing because you're like, oh my God, are you really talking about that? The price at the first time we sequenced a human genome, I think it was $3 billion. And now you can sequence a genome for what? I think 1,000, 500, something like that. But the price of litigating a patent over a gene has gone up, right? So I think the first way I couch this is, our legal price is going to drop. Yes, and well, they should. That's right. And in fact, inherent in our profession is that we want to make the legal process as inexpensive as possible. Right now, I know I can see a lot of lawyers looking at me and saying like, "Yeah, oh, do we, Pablo? Is that really what we want?" But if you look at the first rule of civil procedure, right? No one ever cites to rule 1. It's sort of like this window dressing, but it says just, speedy, and inexpensive resolution of all matters. That's what everything's about, right? So look, is it going to impact pricing when you can largely automate something that used to take hundreds of hours of billable hours of like e-discovery? Yes. And we should rejoice about that. Any real lawyer should be very happy that that is what they can do for their clients. Richard Susskind, the great British legal technologist, pointed out that, look, when new medicine comes out, the doctors say, what does this do for the patients? You don't hear them going, oh my God, well, I used to prescribe 10 pills and now I'll just have to prescribe 1. Right? So I think that law, yes, it's going to have a profound impact on this stuff. But if we're true to our principles, it's a very welcome change.
Yeah. And the firms seem to just. I listened to a bunch of your other podcasts. It sounds like the firms are really embracing this technology and signing up for it. Their clients are asking for it, that kind of thing, right?
It's been an interesting evolution, right? So, I mean, you've heard of course, the Gartner hype cycle. I'm sure, I don't know if it's come up, before. And like, I felt like I was surfing it. You know what I mean? Like I was up there, like, right. And there was a period where I think the firms were hearing from their clients, like, there won't be whatever Simpson Thatcher, whatever, if you don't get the AI, right? And that's choosing Simpson Thatcher, right? Shout out to
Yeah.
Weeley Aycock in London. Congratulations on making managing partner. All right. So, like, that like there was this intense fear, panic, client driven system, right? And don't get me wrong, at the time that was lovely for us, right? It got you, it was very easy to go and, I think that's subsided now. I think what firms are seeing is this is going to be part of life. We need to figure out what we're going to do with it. We need to kind of get involved in it. And that, in a way, I think is better. That's a more sane, kind of civilized way to kind of go about this technology.
Yeah.
But, compared to everything that came before, this is a whole different world, right? I'm used to doing a demo. And if it goes really well, one law librarian will be like, you know what, in a couple of weeks, let's go talk to a different law librarian. And this, it's like, I gave the keynote address at Skadden Arp's global partnership meeting, right? It's like, things that just legal tech you didn't get to do before. Now you're suddenly getting to do it. And so it is definitely, I don't know. It's funny. Like people who are born into this now, they'll never know about what it was like legal tech before. But yeah, again, very welcome progress.
That's exciting, man. And you guys started with OpenAI, right? And are you using like Anthropic? Are you using the other stuff as well, or are you still
Yeah,
using?
yeah. So I mean, we started, obviously GPT-4 was the only game in town, and I still have some loyalty to those guys, right? I mean, they were the guys that,
Yeah.
But I will say that there has been fantastic fantastic progress in at least matching GPT-4, right? And we're getting a little bit better, right? Now, what's OpenAI cooking up right now? What's about to happen, right? Well, things will change again. No question, though, there are now things that you can do with Google Gemini that you can't do with the OpenAI, right? The long context window is a key thing. I love Anthropic 3.5. I think it's a fantastic, their Cloud 3.5 is just fantastic. So, and we know we're testing the meta one, the open source one. So there's now an actually, like, not crowded necessarily, but at least there's more than just one kind of option that's there. But, we have a good relationship with OpenAI. We've, because we were very early, we got, special pricing and things like that. So I'd say we're definitely like centrally using OpenAI, but increasingly we're seeing that there are specific tasks or specific aspects where it makes sense to branch out.
Yeah. And are the firms, or are you guys like uploading their entire, like, remember you reference these old database systems,
Yeah.
document management systems. Are they
Yeah.
uploading everything into like a trainable version and like really trying to use it? Is that happening yet?
So, okay, so depending on how you mean that. So, without question, you need to point this technology at your own documents, right? DMS integration. And Thomson Reuters will have some announcements on that very soon. And my team has been prototyping, things you can do where, you can take this very messy document management system where nobody's named the files correctly, things like that, and let the AI be the sort of advanced team that goes and cleans everything up so that the AI chatbot has something beautiful to interact with, right? So no question you can do that. But there's a difference between that and fine tuning a model on your data, right? And uploading it, right? And I think there it remains to be seen. I think that's one of the interesting areas in this field. In the beginning, firms were sort of like, I know GPT-4 has read everything that's ever written, but wait till it reads my summary judgment motions. Then it's going to get really powerful. And you're like, dude, I know you want to think that, but it's read enough of them. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to have the impact you think, right? But that said, there are certain maybe client specific flow, patterns that you want to kind of capture. So the rise of the fine-tuned model, I think, is one of the cool areas of exploration here. I'm evolving my thinking on it constantly as the models get more and more affordable to fine tune, as smaller models are able to punch above their weight. But I haven't seen any firm that's really fully fine tune a model on their stuff. Maybe I'm trying to think if Harvey did that with their early folks, with one of their firms. I don't think so. I don't think anyone's gone that far yet.
Got it. If you rewind the clock, like back to the days when you and your partners co-founded this company, I'm assuming that you all had thought about, because like it's not like people weren't working on AI back then, but what were you thinking AI was going to look like then, and how did that match or not match, how it evolved in reality?
I was very frustrated with the discrepancy between what AI was doing with vision, facial recognition, etc., and what it was doing with language. And the analogy I made was like, like when Superman, the Superman movies are like, he goes, he beats up like 3 giant aliens, and then somebody puts like a little kryptonite on him, and suddenly like he can't even lift up the phone to call 911, right? like when it came to language, suddenly AI was like, and we saw, like, think of Siri, right? Think of trying to get Alexa to turn off the alarm, right? Like it's horrible, right?
Yeah.
Up until Bert was becoming, I was thinking, look, there's a fortune to be made if anyone could do language. There's got to be so much resources going into it. Why we're not seeing, it's just horrible, the progress. And I admit I was pessimistic, I mean, I think that I was. And I think, that has been one of the great surprises for me, was suddenly seeing Bert and this breakthrough and going, wait a minute, this is actually starting to understand language, but sort of have something there. I never in a million years would have thought that we'd be having conversations about whether or not, AI will be able to fully write briefs in a couple of years, right? Or, would you trust AI to do privilege review? Absolutely no part of me thought that we would be having these sorts of conversations anytime, soon.
That's interesting. And so back in those days, like the tech that you guys were focused on, like describe that, or at a high level at least. Like if it wasn't LLM based, what was it based upon? I'm just curious.
So this is so I was doing old school kind of like legal informatics. Like, so I figured out that, how judges will say like Smith v. Jones, and then in parentheses say holding that yada, yada, yada. Those parentheticals. So that's a human judge summarizing Smith v. Jones in a nice little capsule, right? That little parenthetical. So I was like, this was one of the things that, I did, I think this is 2009. I created a search engine called wellsettled.com. I just harvested those parentheticals. So now I had a database of case summaries written by judges, but I was using code that was probably 2 lines, just this little pattern. They're called regular expressions. And I'll be honest, there's part of me that kind of misses those days where you had to do like really domain specific things. The phrase, it is well settled, is always followed by a concise legal principle. And if you know law, hey, that's an important phrase. So I pulled out, I think, 250,000, it is well settled, it is well established, it is axiomatic, and had that in a database. We looked at crowdsourcing and having humans annotate cases like Wikipedia or Stack Overflow, that kind of flow. And, we were doing by hook or by crook, just all these little tricks to try to kind of get there. And all of them were cool, but, compared to actual computers that can read, now that you look back and you're like, oh my God, that was very crude stuff. So, we were trying, a mix of things, regular expression, crowdsourcing, citation analysis. So our first product was actually using the citation graph, because cases all cite to each other. And there was this blind spot. We're going to get real nerdy here, Nick. Sorry, but you did ask me on a podcast.
I asked. Yeah.
So imagine you go into a video store back when there were video stores, and you said like, I really like the movie The Godfather. Do you have any other recs? And imagine they said, Godfather Part 2, Godfather Part 3. That's my list. You'd be like, boy, are you terrible at making recommendations, right? Because what about Goodfellas? But the citators like Keysight and Shepard's were only looking at direct citations, only if case A directly cites to case B, right? And what we did is said, no, wait a minute. What about judges who cite to case A tend to cite to case B very close by, right? Soft citation relationships. And that's a lot of what powered our first tool called Kara, which felt like AI, right? You could drag a brief and it would find case law for you without you doing anything. That's AI-ish, but it was only because we were exploiting these other patterns and using very crude NLP that we were able to do it. Okay. So yeah, basically just this whole mix. And it was fun. It was creative. You felt like you were like, only legal informaticists could do this. The problem now, honestly, is like, what is legal tech? What's left for us to do when these models are becoming so sophisticated that they're like general purpose and you could point them at medicine or law, right? It's sort of this angsty challenge. a good problem to have, but it's different, you know?
Yeah, and thinking about the future, like, is the future that companies like OpenAI, because of that reality that you just described, are they going to just try to like own all of these verticals, or are they? Do you think they'll be content with what they're doing now, which is sort of like licensing the tech to groups like yours?
You know, it might be something like I've been told repeatedly that Microsoft and Google don't care about law because it's not a big enough vertical, right? But every lawyer in the at least that I know of is using Microsoft Word, right? To draft. That's what you drafted your agreements on. That's what I drafted my briefs on. So it could be that they're not trying to; they just do dominate it, right? Like it's not that they're going after it, but it's just that assists their, you know. I think where that does run into some issues is like I said, you do need content for a lot of this, right? And so I think they'll and some of this stuff, domain specific workflows and domain specific understanding, I think can take it to the next level, you know. But so I don't think OpenAI is going to like one day wake up and be like, God, we really want to laws them, right? But do I think that their general enterprise solution is a competitor? Yeah.
Got it. And what are the companies that were like, not your, I guess they were the incumbents when you started, a decade ago? Like you mentioned a few of them. What is it? Keysights and Shepherds. What are they
Yeah.
doing?
So, I mean, well, Thomson Reuters is just doing the very smart thing of buying us. So that was good on them. No. So, legal research, generally you had your two big players were Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis.
Mm-hmm.
Fastcase was a great company, startup, that was also making case law available to other startups, which is a huge deal, right? Ed Walters is a sort of hero of mine. There's just no other way to say it. But they, they were free if you joined the bar associations, right? So they were definitely out there. They were doing stuff. And in fact, some of the work that I did, like harnessing those parentheticals, was inspired by work that they had done with citation signals and things like that. Then you had like this group of startups. There was one called Ross Intelligence. There was one called Judicata. There was one called Ravel Law. Ravel sold early. Judicata, I got acquired, I think, by Fastcase. Ross is embroiled in litigation. It's a whole other thing. So the startup, and then Fastcase got acquired by VLEX. So it's interesting now that sort of that generation of the startups is kind of all now spoken for. But it remains that Thomson Reuters and Lexis are by far the dominant players.
Okay. And when you think about this industry, we talked a little bit about one of the potential like huge upsides, which is like, man, maybe the price of legal services will go down. And, if you think about like other use cases across the socioeconomic spectrum, maybe access will be improved for people who can't afford lawyers to begin with. That's pretty cool. Do you see any other big things? And then also like, are there any downsides that you see that could come from this stuff?
Yeah, definitely yes to both.
Okay.
I think that one of the cool areas that we can start to get into is compliance monitoring. Well, I'll give an example. 10 years ago or whatever, I got a letter from my landlord company saying, we're increasing your rent. And they said, no one likes a rent increase, but we're doing it under California section 1214.32. And I joke, boy, did you choose the wrong Pablo to send that letter to, right? Because I mean, like, she'd be like, oh, what did the section say? I looked it up on Casetext and I read it. It takes 2 seconds. That doesn't apply, right? It didn't apply. And when I called them on it, they didn't even try to defend it. They didn't even attempt. They go, huh? Oh, boy, that letter shouldn't have gone out. We don't know, And I was like, we're not done. Who else got that letter? Right? Because maybe the next Pablo doesn't know to go look it up on Casetext, right?
Wow. Yeah.
What if every letter that a landlord sent to a tenant went through an AI that policed it for that kind of nonsense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think in a world of infinite resources, we'd love to have the government agency in charge of fair housing, whatever, read every letter to make sure no one, but it's like, come on, that's not realistic. Well, now with AI, maybe it is, right? So I think what I'd love to see is this technology used to kind of catch some of this stuff before it even starts, right? It's great to have free public legal aid chatbots. But look, if you get home and you're, mother of 5 and you got the groceries and there's a eviction notice on your door, your suffering starts immediately. It doesn't matter if then I can go get this chatbot that's going to explain, if 20% of those never should have been posted because they're illegal, right? Or they don't apply, get them before they even hit the door, right? So I think that's going to be one of the coolest things we can do with this is really empower. And like there's already downside. Are there downsides to it? Sure, surveillance state suddenly, right? Like there's we prototyped something where we took images from a factory where these uh, folks were being a little reckless. They were lifting one forklift with another forklift with a gun. And we said, look for OSHA violations, right? Occupational
Yeah.
self. And not only did it find that, it found like 6 others that weren't even testing. So now you can say, well, now all the cameras could start to have like legal intelligence where they could, right? Which, don't get me wrong, there's it's a battle of privacy and security and all these things. So, but anyway, so I think that's one thing I'd love to see is just empowering government agencies that are tasked with fairness, with equal justice, distributive justice, environmental justice, all these things suddenly have just like superpowers, right? And I think that will go a long way towards realizing what we want. Downsides. All right. Writing. You write, you know how hard it is. You know how you struggle with a blank page, and then you'll write something and you realize, oh my God, I'm not doing this correctly. Like I'm going to change. That process is you thinking about it. You're thinking better because you're starting over a draft and crumbling one up. Right? And I'm really worried that if we lose the ability to write, that something profound in us will be lost.
Yeah.
And I feel like, look, nobody can spell now because you just get close enough and the red squiggly line will bring you home. Okay, so you lose like the Latin roots maybe of something. Yeah, I mean, there you go. Nobody can really read a map because of ways. Okay, fine, like map reading is cool, but writing I feel like is qualitatively different. I think it's something that's, so that's one of my fears. I think the McDonald'sification of law, it would be another problem, right? If it's just the same stuff is kind of getting spit out. All of that is overcomable if we teach students correctly and if lawyers, maintain their dedication to the craft in a way, right? And understanding that if you use this well, I think you'll have better writing because it can do your research, a lot of your research for you and free you up to then go do other things. That's another danger. I think there's going to be unequal access in the beginning. The analogy I use there is in the early days of electricity, only Wall Street and Madison Avenue got street lamps, right? We're seeing that right now. There's definitely stuff that I can take to, your Scattons and cravats of the world that would be very useful across all of the profession, but it's just, they're priced out, But I think that's getting better too. I mean, every week you see progress in sort of making this stuff more affordable.
Yeah.
What else? Yeah. So those are some of the main ones that I think.
Yeah, those are interesting. Real quick on the unequal access. I do a lot of civic work around LA, and dude, people can't even get high-speed internet in certain neighborhoods,
right?
Because our system is so messed up. So yeah, that one is for sure. But before we get into the negatives, I want to go back to one of the positives, because that's really exciting. Like that just that one story use case you shared about the fair housing stuff, that's actually really interesting. Do you think that these systems could prevent or identify fraud? Has that ever been tested?
I'm sure it's being tested right now. Absolutely. Right. And yes, I think that they could absolutely play a role in it. And part of this is because we've been doing e-discovery projects, go find bribery or go find this or that. Right. 100%. There is so many shenanigans that are getting by because we don't actually have the resources to police this stuff. And I think that this AI can suddenly bring power to that.
Yeah, it seems like I have had a few people kind of in the criminal justice world on the show, including, our former classmates who are now elected officials. Yeah. And,
yes.
And Dan Goldman too, because he did a lot of work as a prosecutor, but everyone talks about how in that world, there's like a profound lack of resources,
right.
And like cases are just not being followed up on because they don't have time to like do the work. And like, even like crazy cases. Like I had this one this one leader of a nonprofit group that's doing like trafficking cases. And he's like, dude, 90% of them go uninvestigated of the leads that they get, which is like, holy crap. So maybe this AI will, this technology can help alleviate the burden of processing all this information. Yeah.
Right. I'll give you another example. So one of our beta clients was the Innocence Project, and they use this technology to help with their backlog of applications, right? So that you could find, this is getting innocent people out of jail. This is like sort of as densely just a cause as you can get. And it's early days, but we're talking with DLA Piper about what would it look like to do this nationwide, right? Because we were with the California Innocence Project. Imagine right now there are these huge backlogs of applications that haven't even been looked at. It's not looked at and said, no, I don't think there's a case here. It's like no one's even looked at it. We want to scan those and have AI help to triage those, right? At least as an initial pass. It's really humbling and overwhelming to think of all the good you can do if you use this stuff correctly, with oversight, though, right? And that's the other thing, is that these things make mistakes and they're not infallible by any means. And so you do have to set things up in a way that there's oversight. But what could be worse than nobody read it, right? Like no one's even gone to it.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you look at what the baseline is, a lot of times the AI can move the needle immediately.
And by oversight, like imagine that use case you just described, like the examining the applications for the innocent projects. That basically means like some kind of human intervention, an intelligent person looking at.
I mean, well, yes, that's the most important, right? I mean, you can do certain things, like you could have like multiple models, so like you see, do they disagree with each other? We did certain things, like if ever it was quoting a case, you can like check if the quote's real using like old technology. So there's other automated oversight you can do, but the most important one is a human, right? That's absolutely the most important, and that limits some things, right? Like that means. But even with that requirement, I think you can still have just a huge shift in what we're capable of doing.
Yeah, but that kind of example is kind of counter to the narrative, which is like everyone's going to lose their job. There's going to be nothing left for human beings to do, and that's not necessarily true, because it just might be something different. It might be like managing these systems and making sure that we don't get a bunch of false outputs from whatever task we're trying to do.
Right. Like one thing is, could it create like now oversight of things like these systems, let's say the landlord one, right? Like that would need oversight. There's new lawyer jobs, which is now kind of helping that thing stay on course. Other jobs I do think are at risk, right? I mean, if you contract attorneys who do doc review for, $40 an hour, I got to say that's a really at risk position, right? Because the AI is so good at it. And again, we're only talking about what we have right now. What's coming next, the reasoning and the multi-step and the long horizon, right? Where it's able to like that could have a lot more profound impact than, I mean, like once again, I might not be fully realizing how much things are about to change. We'll find out relatively soon,
Okay. I want to get to that in a minute, but let's go through the negatives, because I had one point and then one question. So the point is, I completely agree with this writing thing, as someone who's been doing it, doing it for more than 5 years, but actually publishing for 5 years. It's humbling, because you think you know something and you don't. When you start writing, you're like, holy crap, I don't actually know what I'm talking about.
That's such a good point, right? You literally discover your actual state of things by trying to get it down. And that's this human brain doing this amazing thing. That AI, and so if you lose that, and people say, oh, well, you'll do it together. And it's like the AI wrote it, and then I changed these adverbs, and then we did it together. Nah, you're kidding yourself, right? Like it's not,
and I feel like I don't hang around that many people from like Gen Z, but I hang around a few, and I get the feeling that that's what's happening though. Everyone is like the first draft of everything, even like emails to people and letters and whatever, that's all being done using the aid of one of these systems.
Can you imagine being in like freshman year of high school, Nick, and it's like, hey, or we could go play basketball and you can have the AI do that. Like, come on. Like it's like, I get the temptation, but that's all the more reason why we have to fight it.
Yeah. Okay, so now the question. So you mentioned too that one of the downsides could be the McDonald's-ification of everything, and it made me remember something that Nathan and I spoke about in our podcast episode, which is he was particularly concerned about the potential for what he called information pollution, and I feel like that is probably really relevant in the legal world, where like if generative AI produces a bunch of garbage that then is being consumed as part of the training process of, what is your take on that?
So I love that there's already a word, like, email has spam, but it took a while for spam to become a word. Have you heard the word slop?
No, I have not. Yeah.
Okay, slop. You heard it here first, kids. Slop is unwanted AI garbage that's just put out by AI, right? Right.
Yeah.
And I think people use the analogy right now. You'll run a Google search, and without you asking, like this little AI is like, "Hey, let me tell you about it," right? And like that's often slop. Slop is going to be content marketing that's just from the AI, right? It's such a great word for just that. It's basically what you mean by garbage. Okay. We know, Thomson Reuters, that these models make mistakes. We tell everyone you need oversight. It's the beginning of your process, right? Same with Lex, same with all of them, right? And the idea is you have oversight and these mistakes get caught and da-da-da, right? Do I think there's a danger that some of these mistakes make it into the brief and then the clerk doesn't correct it? And now you have this like wrong thing that's suddenly gone from AI slop to like judicial opinion, right? That's a danger. Now, look, that was a danger before AI, so it's not like AI invented it, right? What's about to happen if like more and more of our content is actually just created by that? It's hard. It's a little depressing to think about what that could mean. At the same time, if we use it well, it's really cool to think about what it can mean. I mean, I'll use a litigation example, like looking up like legislative intent. That's the kind of thing you do if you had like an appeal. If you were writing your term paper at Stanford, sure, or, when you have a motion due in 3 days, you don't always have time to go read the legislative intent, right? But if the AI could surface it for you, right, and really make it much more easy, so then you can increase, like the U Chicago article that's relevant that you never would have had time to go find. If suddenly the AI like says, check this out, now you're writing a much more powerful brief than you would be. So there's the upside of it if it's done well. If it's done wrong, I think that it's hard to say, but I think it'll be this deterioration in what was the most important thing we have, which is our like collective written consciousness.
Yeah, it'll be hard. Like in the current state of the technology, it would be hard to parse out slop from non-slop.
Did you see the Wall Street Journal article that they're claiming OpenAI has a way to detect it?
Okay.
And hasn't released it for various reasons. And then I can't resist one other anecdote I read recently. A professor put out the assignment electronically, and then in font that was too small to read, said, and talk about gorillas. As and exams came back that suddenly in the middle were like, and gorillas are done.
That's incredible.
So that the AI caught it, right? I mean,
yeah.
So I think we're gonna have to fight it, because our tendency is to be lazy, and because the AI stuff. Look, we call it slop, but a lot of it looks good. It looks, hey, you know what I mean? Like that's and so it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle, but it's worth fighting.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we got a little bit of time left. I want to get your opinion on some big picture items. You mentioned a few minutes ago, like, hey, what could come next? Like, what do you think is coming next, and who's got it? Like, is OpenAI still the front runner, or what's your take?
I think OpenAI has it. I think, and this is speculation, it might be under government review, and it will be profound. It will be.
How soon are we talking?
Sam Altman's on record saying he thinks it'll drop this year. There's talk of maybe they're waiting for the election or not. But what you should expect is being able to do long horizon tasks, things that, you kind of set going and then you come back 2 hours later, and reasoning and multi-step, right? It's sort of ability to say, okay, well, then I need to go figure this out. And it goes and figures it out itself. And it says, now based on that answer, I'm going to go figure this out. Now, there are those who think that it's plateaued and that we're not going to see a big jump. So, and very bright minds have, there's like Jan LeCun at Meta, so there are profound limitations in what large language models can do. So very much brighter minds than mine disagree on what's next. But I'm of the mind that there's going to be another big jump.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like right around the time that I did the interview with Nathan, Microsoft and OpenAI announced that crazy supercomputer, that $100 billion supercomputer. Yeah. And it seems like if they're going to do that and they're going to publicly announce it, like the odds that they don't have something to justify that.
So, and this is the thing, I got to be among those lucky few that had GPT-4 before anyone had kind of seen and you get to do this fun thing of like predicting, but it's not. There are things that are real that are out there right now that are blowing people's mind.
Yeah. With all that in mind, we've sort of hinted on this a few times in this conversation, but What do you think about the idea of like what the AI governance model should be for the United States or for the world or just in general? Like, what are we supposed to do in the face of this rapidly evolving technology?
Well, I'll tell you what not to do is what this proposed California regulation is. I think right now there's been some sort of clumsy attempts at this that are just using like model size as the proxy without like thinking about functionality that are, and again, this is another one of many things where like much better minds than mine can be consulted, on this stuff. But, there's, I think regulating the use case is important, not the tech itself, because you can use this stuff in so many different ways.
I've been thinking a lot about it, and I've been struggling to think through because it seems like people are presenting this in a similar fashion as the atomic race.
Right.
And the atomic race, to me, I get it. Like once you have an atomic weapon, like you basically become a very formidable adversary because you can't really mess with that person. It becomes like that. And to me, it doesn't seem like AI is the same thing as that. Meaning, like if you developed AI that could reason, like does that really make you all of a sudden like an untouchable military foe? Maybe it does. Maybe I just don't see the implications, but I feel like it's different. What's your take on that sort of hypothesis?
Yeah, I guess one version maybe, and again, we're so beyond, right? It's
Yeah.
like, well, the AI is like this Napoleon that knows the exact way to, like
Yeah.
no general would have thought to do that, but the AI did, and that's why you won the battle. I think it might be more about things like active measures, psychology, like getting infiltrating social media and psychology.
Yeah.
There's a study that showed that this technology is more effective at unbrainwashing people than humans. Right. Oh, well, why don't you think the moon landing happened, buddy? Let's talk about, you know what I mean? Like kind of like
Yeah.
watching it through, oh yeah, but
Yeah.
the Soviets watched the whole thing happen. You know that? Like they probably would have told on us, right?
Yeah.
And so, could the AI be used to do that sort of stuff at just a new level? Probably. And frankly, I bet it's already starting to happen. I'd be shocked if there are. In fact, I think I read somewhere they're already using some AI to do like tweets and stuff like that. They
Yeah.
being, foreign states that are trying to mess with the election.
And mess
I
with
do,
those
look,
yeah.
intelligence is a hell of a thing, and so I do sympathize with those who are like, look, like you're right, we don't fully know, but you got to think if the guys get in a room and think of all the ways you can take advantage of this like super intelligence, like they'll come up with some things. But again, it's like I think China's going to have AI too, right? I mean, they have data, they have great scientists, they're actually leading in papers published. You know what I mean? So there's just this like, I don't know, but this also gets into just bigger picture, like what is the world supposed to be, and that's
Yeah.
it's tough.
Is AI like a technology where let's say you developed artificial general intelligence, and it was on this supercomputer. Does that give you the power to prevent other people? Like, does that give you control over the grid and control over science? Like, is it
I
that kind
mean,
of thing?
so like we know the Stuxnet virus, right, where the Israel went into the centrifuges of the Iranians,
Yeah.
and they did it in such a way that like they didn't realize that they were getting messed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yes, I'm sure really good AI could do all sorts of shenanigans. But, is it a setback or is it like right? You know what I mean? Like, is it right?
Yeah.
And then somebody steals all the weights and now they've got the super AI. It just, yeah, it's hard. But I'm of the mind of we should be pushing towards global cooperation as much as possible, precisely because this stuff is really important. And unfortunately, I think there are those who understandably have a lot of concerns. They see things in very much like a clash of civilizations kind of view.
Yeah.
And that seems to be winning right now, that approach.
But Nathan had a similar point of view. He's like you, an AI native person who's actually like working in the industry, and he was really pushing for cooperation. And I thought on another podcast recently, you made a really interesting analogy, I guess, where you were kind of comparing this industry to the oil industry, and what makes this one different than all other industries ever is that this is the first time we're levering up on like something that we created.
Yeah.
So God created, or science,
right.
whatever your beliefs be. God
Right.
created the oil business, but this is the human created endeavor in a sense, which I think is really interesting. And there's a lot to be learned, right? Like these other languages have so many interesting nuances that make you think differently, right? Like
Right.
you know when you use a different language, your brain operates differently. So like, why wouldn't we want to combine forces and come up with? Yeah,
That's my dream. That is my dream. Is all the librarians of the world create this sort of multinational corporate project, right?
yeah,
I'd be referencing the Human Genome Project again, but I already did it once, and if you do
yeah,
it twice, it's like, you know. But yeah, I think that there's something about that. This is our combined writing. This is all of the writing that our species has ever done
yeah.
now being taught, right? And there's something unifying about that, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's a time where we could use this as a chance to do better, but we'll see what happens.
it's our culture, totally. Well, last question. I know you got to get out of here, but what do you think about the AI safety debate?
Well, I mean, again, like that's there's a lot of different things there. So I'd say, so again, as always, and pretty much just a headline here, there are better people than Pablo Arredondo to go ask about basically anything except maybe applying this stuff in law.
Legal tech. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hold my own. I'll hold my own with anyone on that. But so I think that okay, what are some of the things that I've liked that I've heard and read? Okay, so first is that like the near term socioeconomic impacts are probably going to be more severe than the long term. Oh my God, it becomes Cyberdyne and kills everybody, right? Like you're like that, like you know. I'll be honest. There are times where I think some of this debate is just really good marketing for the AI folks, right? Because if you're worried that something's going to take over the world, like, boy, is it going to help me file my tax returns, right? You know what I mean? Like it's like that. Like, so having this debate about the existential crisis just helps kind of fuel the right. But that said, I think that there are like, you know, there's a lot of paths where you can see like violent disruption to the economy, right? Where like entire categories of work are suddenly automated, and you know, this is common, common talk, but like normally you have a lot of time for these revolutions, right? Here it's going to be very fast, and that can lead to disruption. I think a lot of it we have to see with the next generation stuff, right? I think that's the other thing, is that if it plateaus here or near here, okay, you know, there's only so much you can do. If we get to this level where this, you know, like just literally better than humans at everything that humans do,
Yeah.
I mean, then safety, I do. So you can tell, man, this isn't like an area that I'm an expert at.
Yeah.
But I know that people like Jeff Hinton, you know, very serious people who are not prone to hyperbole, who are not like theatrical, who do not make their money by selling fear as a thing, right?
Yep.
Are profoundly concerned about it. And I think that is something that, even though there are also very good people that are saying this is completely overblown, I heard one person saying it's like worrying about overpopulation on Mars. That's what these people are like, right?
Yep.
So I would look at Jeff Hinton. I would look at Andrew Ng at Stanford. Those are two great folks to kind of hear the debate about like what is this stuff capable of and what kind of regulation we should have.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to try to follow up with both of them because that might be a fun series to do. Well, I really appreciate the time, man. It's great to see you, and I'm
so good to see you, Nick.
Yeah, I'm super excited about what you've created with CoCounsel, and I can't wait to see how it evolves. I feel like that's just so many opportunities, and it will make that industry better, and it'll make it fair, and it'll make the justice system fair if we do it right. So I'm excited to see how that plays out, man. Appreciate the work.
Excited times. Next time you're in Palo Alto, man, we got to get back to the basketball courts, man. Ford Center, it's still
Let's
there.
Do it. Let's do it.
All right. There's one thing the AI can't touch yet.
There's our basketball game. I'll continue to dominate. Don't worry.
I'm not endorsing that statement, just for the record.
Thanks, Pablo. Later.
See you, brother. Bye.